Hello, my name is Brant Hunt. My channel is Discerning What is True, and I'm going to be reading again tonight The Temple of Man. I'm sorry, The Temple in Man, I should say, by Rene Schwaller de Lubicz. I'm going to be reading chapter 1. Chapter 1, that is. We have gone through what I call all the preface works here before, the definitions. And so, what we're going to be doing now is read the particular chapter 1, which is called the hypothesis and its evolution. So let's get into this particular work tonight. Again, today is the 25th day of November 2023. The architecture of the Temple of Lazar is at first glance disconcerting. From the southern sanctuary to the north pylons, the axis never ceased to deviate. There is scarcely a regular shape in the plan. What seems square is rhomboidal. The inter-column spacing increases occasionally in the direction of the sanctuary, thus compensating for the effect of perspective. Moreover, the entire construction was carried out in several phases. The Temple of Lazar could be called Parthenon, based on its fundamental kingship with the Parthenon of Athens. Its preferred destination has been that of a theorgamic temple, but it is in fact, because of the deeper meaning of its consecration, the true Parthenon, that is to say, the temple devoted to the spiritual concept or conception of man. Although they never sacrifice anything for aesthetics, but conform solely to the reality of the symbol, the pharaonic builders always achieve masterpieces of harmony, even in intentionally deformities and ugliness, through symbolic and geometrically exactitudes. Nothing is central for them. And this shocks our Western sense of aesthetics. Everything is solely didactic of an esoteric nature. It is a teaching for the understanding, for the pure intellect, a teaching that cannot be described in explicit terms. We have too many proofs showing that nothing in their work is the result of negligence, chance, or personal whim, for us not to look for the meaning hidden behind apparent disorder. To avoid this research would be to miss the purpose of archaeologies, which we're going to say here. Let me give you the definition real quick here. Parthenonius genius, that is Genesis, is taken here in a sense of creation, and not in the zoological sense of being at one point male, then female, as in the case with the androgynous monsters. We continue on to learn what the past has to teach us and not to impose our own conceptions on the ancients. Starting from this premise, I have tried with neither prejudice nor obstinance in my hypothesis, to understand little by little what the observed fact might show us, allowing myself to be guided by the Gothic tradition, which bases the cathedral on the symbol of the cross, and even occasionally bends the apse in memory of the bow head of the crucified Lord. I should say not bowed, I should say bowed head of the crucified Lord. I first pictured as the plan of the base, the outline of a human figure to explain the strange deformation of the architectural plan of the Temple of Lazar. Does the plan of the Basilica of St. Peter in Rome, completed by Bernigni colonnades, not represent the shape of a key? Similar, a recumbent figure such as the reborn Osiris, placing one foot in front of the other, could very well have been placed over the plan of the Temple of Lazar. The feet would have been the pylons, the knees, the two colossal seated at the entrance of the colonnade of Ammon, that is the colonnade representing the thighs, the peristyle court being the abdomen, and the hypostyle entrance, the chest area. The head being located in the covered what I call sanctuary. The proportions of a body thus placed over the plan corresponds temporally. However, only the proportions indicated by the construction justify such a proposition. I found in my supposition an eminent predecessor in Etine. All right, I don't know how to pronounce this, so I'm going to spell you the name here. Etienne In his particular hypothesis, which consists of seeing the image of a Ojo eye in the plan of the sanctuaries of Madaman, has not been born out of subsequently. The Egyptian temple is often called the eye of God. His intuition was nonetheless remarkable, as we shall see in the case of the Temple of the Lord. A recumbent reborn Osiris was, however, only a petty, or I should say pretty image, in keeping with our simplistic Western understanding of the symbol. Pharaonic thought, more profound, allows for no fantasy in the expression of the living symbol. The parallel between an Egyptian temple and our cathedrals was not suggested solely by the search for the same conception in the symbolism of the grand plan. H. Schaeffer believed he had found in the Temple of the Zohar the origins of the canon of the plan of the Greek basilica and its derivatives. But in Christian architecture, the basilica must not be confused with the cathedral viewed in the sense of center of higher teachings. Karnak is the synthetic royal temple. The Zohar is the cathedral of the great teaching. Moreover, the layout of the temple is indeed that which we encounter again in the canon of the Gothic cathedral, except that the two pylons replace the two towers. The general plan of the cathedral corresponds to an exact canon. Two towers, a narthex, a nave that is a triple and with 7 windows as a rule, on the walls of which the stations of the cross are later drawn. Then comes the transept, and then the entrance proper to the sanctuary. The remainder being reserved for the faithful. The choir, separated from the transept by the rood screen, R-O-O-D, is itself divided according to the importance of the form of worship. The altar being the table for the daily sacrifice and repository, hearing the sacred host in the bark of its silver crescent. In those churches that are privileged to celebrate the papal mass, the bishop's throne is behind the altar, hidden from the public. It is there that he celebrates the sacrament, as in the Holy of Holies, as in the case in the Orthodox cult. In the Temple of the Zohar, we find identical layout. And see figure 1, so I'm going to show you this. Try to do the best I can here. And this is it here. Try to show it right here. The two pylons, the court of Ramses as the narthex, the double row of 7 high columns with open corridors forming the naves, with 2 subsidiary naves whose lateral walls are decorated with bas reliefs representing the procession of the bark. After the nave, with its 2 rows of 7 columns, the peristyle extends east and west, forming a cross, the transept. Then comes the covered temple, whose parallelism with the cathedral choir is striking. The high altar, represented here by the dais containing the sacred bark that is symbolizing the crescent moon, is located in the choir proper. It's room 6, figure 3. I'm going to show you that figure. So that's the one I showed you earlier. Sorry. The next figure will be figure 4. Where am I at here? The high altar is room 4 and 8 taking the place. Okay. A more learned etymology meaning has been preferred for transeptium, beyond the boundary. The fact that the nave is septuate in its length is overlooked. Of the front part of the choir, originally the chamber of the naos, was not connected with the rooms to the south. The lateral rooms 9, 2, 10, 14, 3, 15, and 17 linked by room 12 we call the amulet surrounding the choir. The 27 small chapels opening into informative rooms would correspond to the radiating chapels. Finally, the central southern sanctuary, one where stood the statue of Ammon, is located at the site of the Aspid Chapel. Let's see. It's going to be really hard again to show you this. It's not in deep colors, which is really frustrating. This is it up here at the top. Ancient tradition demanded that the choir be separated from the transept by a rood screen, and the amulet itself might be enclosed by decorative work such as a raw iron railing, tombs, etc. However, at Lazor, there is no connection except for the central door leading into room 4 to what I have identified as the choir, and the rest of the temple chapels, that is number 19, 20, and 21, are connected only to the great hypostyle hall. Thus it is these latter rooms, as well as rooms 8, 18, and 22, that might constitute the rood screen of the cathedral. This rood screen includes stairways to the right and left in the Temple of Zor. There exists a stairway to the west, and certain signs show that there seemed to have been a second stairway to the east originally. All these elements enable us to connect the Temple of Zor with the Gothic cathedral. Having completed the survey, not only of scenes and of each figure, but ultimately of every stone in the walls, taken into account ratifications to be made in the case of accidental disjunction of the blocks, I was struck by the strange position shown by certain paving stones because of the way in which they were cut. This would be figures 4 and 5. So this would be showing down here at the very bottom, the way the stones were cut. The survey having been completed, the whole revealed in a startling manner the shapes of an eye, a ear, a mouth, and a headband, placed in such a way as to reproduce a face seen in profile, excluding the crown of the skull. Now, for many years, we have undertaken the study of the proportions of the human body in the spirit of the ancient Egyptians, and we have examined their way of thus transcribing its cosmic meaning in the manner later adopted by Delphus, that is Delphes. Did not Moses, who was reared in Egypt, affirm that man is made in God's image? Man is thus considered as a summation of the universe. I revised my earlier hypothesis. If the head revealed by the paving were truly a human profile, and if the null of the crown of the head it had a given size, then the different parts of the temple and each figure must have absolutely defined proportions, and each important point in the body must of necessity be placed at key points of the plan, which was verified. And that's with 4 and 5 figures. This becomes proof of the projection in the temple, not of a defined image, but a microcosmic man. Though the sex organ is not represented in the architecture itself, no excavation has been carried out in this area. We find it in a bas relief located at point N, which is north, see figure 1. Around the opening that would represent the eureka of the symbolized man, here is drawn a minimum, that is the god Ammon, in the form of a figure bound as a mummy from the chest downward and with erect phallus indicating the genital functions. The man, the man is not just found. The man is not just found in the place corresponding to it. It's also corresponding to the very principle of the temple. That's figure 6. Let me see if I can show you that one. It's going to be difficult again to see. I'll try my best here to show it to you. So that's it there. Try to keep it stationary. From averages established from measurement of the human body, it has been proved that the native divides the total height of the body in the proportions of omega to 1. This formula is applied to a classic Greek sculpture and in Egypt as well, except that here the crown of the head is excluded. In the MIN in question, the phallus is not at the natural place, but exactly at the place of the navel, the material attachment. Let us recall in this regard the significance of the valve and the geometric structure that defines it. The valve, or the golden number, corresponds to the proportion such and such equals such and such, when C equals A plus B. There is only one number that corresponds to this proposition, and it can be translated as 1.61803395. The geometric function that solves this problem is in the multiplication form. And again, it's the same number in the multiplicative form. AB equals BA. In other words, you have A at the top, B at the bottom. The divided line equals B at the top with the A at the down part. B equals 1, A equals, and C equals 1, which ends up with 161803395. All the constructions of the pi, or not pi, but the omega symbol here, that can also be found at the starting point of Byzantine basilicas, and its cathedrals always had as a basis the right triangle whose sides are 1 and 2, and whose by hypothesis, meaning being check over 5, in the diagonal of a double square. In figure 6, which I just showed, the superimposition of the outline of divisional gives the location of the phallus at the place of the navel, which I'm looking at here. Interesting. Then it goes in what I call a geometric construction. So these are going to be on the other side here. I'll try to show these also to you. Make it clear. Here's not on this side here, but this side here. Geometric construction of omega multiple form, that is, the formula gives the same geometric function in the divisional form. So it's now A over B over A equals 1 over such and such equals 0.61803395. I don't know why he does not show this omega theorem here. I'm sorry about that. Figure 8, geometric construction based on division. If the unity is A, we thus get the golden number for B, and for 1, that is omega 2 for C. Occasionally one hears this remark, the golden number can be found everywhere. This is incorrect. But if practice and usage had established a balanced form that is pleasing, or had shown itself to be particularly stable, a function of the golden number may be sought there. No one thought of this number in establishing this form, any more than a plant would think of it, or a woman carrying a child. The golden number is not the product of mathematical imagination, but the natural principle of the laws of equilibrium. Figure 6 shows the superimposium of position of dividing functions of the golden number over the kamutha, or bound figure. We see that the phallus, instead of being located at half the height of the body, is in the place of the navel. Thus, we are dealing with kamutha, whose known meaning of material bull signifies the primordial seed acting on itself, or self-conception, spiritual conception of man without the material the maternal woman, that is, Adamic, Adamic creation. It is then necessary to ascertain the relationship between the parts of the architecture and the head representing on the floor, and the proportions that the body must have. We cannot trace out this head in profile any which way to complete the design shown by the pavement. The head is constructed according to a very precise proportions determined here by the walls. See figure 9. In addition, I have to follow the openings or doors corresponding to the different passages found in the human head. For all these processes, I was guided by the keys that the master builders carefully set into the walls and the floor. Here, a digression is in order. I should like to point out that always in the walls and on the floors of Egyptian temples, there are certain keys that are guides for measure. These little bits of stone set into certain blocks are too easily attributed to sculptural errors. The error lies in interpreting them thus. Each stone has a value and a significance. I have found a great number of these keys that must have been set in place at the time the construction was assembled. In fact, certain keys are cut in such a way that they could not have been set in place at any other time. I point out these facts to Egyptologists and archaeologists that they may make some unusual observations. It is an act of vandalism to touch any stone without having first situated it precisely on the plan. That is to photograph it, and in any event, measure it carefully. You see the sex organs going, here's a note here, number 8. The sex organ divides the height of a man, including the crown of the skull, into 2 equal parts. In fact, the sex organ exists only for natural man, that is to say, man exiled from earthly paradise and possessing his own judgment. The symbolism is thus respected. See chapter 2. We haven't done chapter 2 yet, so we'll do that later on. Figure 9, which is the bas relief from room 20, breakdown of the face according to the golden section from the chin to the upper eyelid, from the chin of the mouth, and from the chin to the eyebrow, from the chin to the eyebrow. So I'm going to show you this here. This is figure 9. And this is it right here. This precision as measurement enables me to relate the figures of the bas relief of one partition with those on the other side of the same wall. Here's where transposition completes the idea. I'll call this process transposition because the complete complements, I should say, of an idea set forth in a given room in which it is developed are given in another room, dedicated to another development. The accord between the two themes develop through a common element and creates sequence that explains the true esoteric meaning as a logical conclusion. It often happens that the reading of texts and symbols on one wall has meaning only through the indirect superimposition through the wall. This superimposition, which should be studied precisely in the minimest detail, is repeated for hieroglyphs as well as figures, that is, persons, attributes, and accessories. Transposition must not be confused with what I call transparency. I shall have occasion later to note 2 typical cases, one of transposition, the other transparency. In the case of transparency, if the wall were made of glass, one could see, for example, drawn on the verso, a sign or a figure that fills a gap on the retro. A nanas or bark may remain empty and be only a container whose contents are on the other side of the wall, in a room where its steam is specially treated. In the case of transparency, the stone goes through the wall to mark an indirect connection between the 2 images. In these 2 processes, we are dealing with symbolic inscriptions of a vital, precise nature and not with ordinary, readily decipherable cryptography. Reading these symbolic inscriptions requires a philosophical directive, and a searching study of the theme and the hidden meaning of the myth. This method is teachings could be called an architectural parable. In attempting to interpret certain oversights in a figuration, most people have ascribed them to negligence. Henceforth, they will realize the incredible position that the Egyptians applied to the composition of their bas reliefs. I hold that every stone in the wall of the covered temple was cut according to complete predetermined measurements. Similarly, the settings of each stone was chosen with exact knowledge of the scene to be depleted there, the joints being located in such a way as to cut intentionally head, feet, hands, attributes, etc., as you can see in Figure 10. All this is part of hieroglyphic writings. The epigraphic alone will never reveal the secret teachings of the sages. One must learn to read the images. And he goes in here and gives you a still illustration in 9 of the footnote here. As I said, indirect to avoid confusion with superimposing the outline of figures on the same scene, which has a purpose similar to that of transparency. The plans and figures shown here demonstrate better than any explanation the reality of this figuration of man as the basis of the architecture of this temple. However, this representation, which can be verified through the proportions indicated, is still only an image. The intentions of the master builders far surpasses a simple figuration, since we are dealing with man, and since the architecture takes into account the channels and vital centers of the human body. The meaning of the figurations in sculptures and bas reliefs is equally relevant. It is a magnificent lesson for everyone to be able to study across time the knowledge already millennia old, bequeathed to the builders of the true temples. Every vital center is indicated. The glands and the vital connection between the organs represented in the scenes reveal their correspondence with the nether that governs them. This throws much light on one of the true meanings of the pantheon. The summary of principles here. The sages have always endeavored to hand down to posterity the revelation of the Spirit disguised in the form of the words and parables of the sacred texts. These texts are a synthesis of knowledge, whose basis is always the same, though adapted to the times and to the state of consciousness of a people or peoples. The means adopted for transmitting this teaching are manifold, comprising legends, tales, and customs, as well as monuments, statues, and temples. Thus, up to the end of the Middle Ages, the Christian tradition assigned specific attributes to a given saint, sculpture or painted, and thus attributes are variable scripture revealing what cannot be said in plain words. Temples, whether Hindu, Egyptian, Jewish, Christian, or Muslim, are always conceived according to a canon that respects certain elements which explain the teachings. In Egypt and in India, as well as later in the Gothic period of Christendom, that is, Christian cathedrals, the temples was a book revealing esoteric teachings. Do you understand that the churches and cathedrals that are in France and other places, especially the Gothic ones, are revealing something deeper? It's esoteric. Esoteric should not be understood as a rebus of a secret writing, but rather as the spirit of the letter. That is to say, that which cannot be transcribed clearly, not because there is any desire to conceal it, but because of the cerebral intellect inaptitude for comprehending it. The character of the means of transcription of this esotericism should therefore be such that it addresses the faculties of the reader. The latter will read and understand it depending on his own faculties, whether normal or superior, intuition, spatial vision. Each will see in the parable or in the architecture of the true temple what he can see: utility, aesthetics, myths and legend, philosophical principle, or vision of material and spiritual genesis. In the case of Pharaonic temple, one must always try to determine first of all what theme was emphasized. The dedication gives only an initial general indication. It appears quite distinctly that the secret Pharaonic teaching was based on the vital functions for which the organs are the living symbols. In the sense explained previously, there can no longer be any doubt of the ancients' knowledge with regard to what might be called spiritual metabolism, from the assimilation of nourishment to the liberation of the energy or spirit manifested in intellectual faculties and the powers of consciousness. So that is the conclusion of chapter 1 tonight, and it is getting late. It's approximately 11 o'clock here Eastern Standard Time. these are symbols here. You see, they're trying to relate this stuff. It's not to be hidden, so to speak, what he's saying. It's for those who are aware, who can see these things. Then it's revealed to them. No one can teach these things to them, supposedly. You see? So this is the conclusion of chapter 1 of the book, which is called The Temple of Man. And again, the writer here is a gentleman, Schroeder. His first name was Rene Schwaller de Lubicz. This book was, again, like I said, was transcribed, but this book was written in 1949. So this is over 70 years old. This book was written. So this is the conclusion of chapter 1 tonight of The Temple of Man by Rene Schwaller. Thank you for being here, and hope that you have ears to hear and eyes to see and a heart to discern what is true. Thank you. Take care.